Okay.
Thus I have heard. At one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of Vulture Peak Mountain with a great gathering of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was absorbed in the samadhi of the many aspects of phenomena called profound appearance. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, "How should a son of the lineage train who wishes to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva answered the Venerable Sharadvatiputra with these words. Shariputra, those men and women of the lineage who wish to follow the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should look at it like this. The five skandhas should be seen purely in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, like this, all phenomena are emptiness, and having no characteristics, they are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no phenomena. There is no quality of sight and so on until no quality of mind and no quality of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance and so on up to no old age and death and no exhaustion of old age and death. In the same way, there is no suffering, no origin, no ending, and no path. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide by means of the profound perfection of wisdom. And since their minds have no obscurations, they have no fear. Transcending falsity, they attain nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times have relied upon the perfection of wisdom. and have become true and complete Buddhas of unsurpassable, perfect, and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the profound perfection of wisdom, the mantra of insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, for it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Teata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi soha. Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and said to the bodhisattva mahasattva noble Avalokiteshvara that he had spoken well. Well done, O son of the lineage, it is so. O son of the lineage, since it is just so, the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One has said this, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra and noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the entire gathering, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One.
变作给了下面准备过，大约诸月这我公约送，马列西藏接见随便过，下去做我的那所我的，多久我的心多坚强，求在的罗波当那罗波。边中中边波当阿的香，娘来新老旧老所瓦的，上波同面也当着的，秋天的月的当着边边，这上个山的年所连波，家去是边境老所瓦的，洋洋月面兄弟路中大王这波是别个就见，三界公众宝宝要塞苏，双毛大愿就那苏瓦的，西主当别中阿的香，嘎当的别面光中的见，那就那就过去送那苏，嘎当那么那那苏瓦的。康健心的早节做妈妈，我到这边我手接早节，到我这边到我给着节，要是就把节那说完的，叫做滚的那么多节强，刚了刚的先年最终。就当天幕我住自在边，真见老妈弄了所望的，让家送着跟了到一面，别让他把这边就完就，这边这边他看这把一，现在先年弄了所望的。借我更多养到那么弄，这边去这边老龙学，找到龙就有点少做的，多久讲给个。不念到就上界就当所界就当当，想就不多到那就做的，大概去去就别做那的，到了平时上界就不说上界就做界就当当，想就不多到那就做的。大概就这别做那的，到了平时上的主播手上的就做的就那就不多的就做，大概就这别做那的，到了平时上的主播手。哎呀。Untitled. Mà chúng tôi chuyện đó bắt đầu để xem đó để bắt đầu cái để cả sa chỉ sống một sinh này sống theo dòng một year là cái sự này sống rồi sống bao nhiêu year nên sau này chưa tôi đang chỉ biết thôi nên cái nó để chưa thì để chúng ta trên để xem vậy na ta mà xong chỉ không biết buồn chỉ biết sống chỉ rồi.
Oh, here, as usual, we have recited what is to be recited, prior to our receiving of the teachings, such as taking refuge in rituals, in generation of bodhicitta, and so forth. So when one is reciting those verses, it's not only that one is actually expressing the words alone, reciting the words alone, but also try to contemplate on the meaning of that words. One try to get insight into the meaning. That is all important, and which also allows you to, cultivate appropriate motivations to receive, for receiving teachings of the Dharma.
다 처음에 내가 되게 찾아낸 게 너무 가서 랑게 되게 나가 되냐는 템버 투병하고 내가 책임이다. also die besser ja die Bion die Channel da so sehen so na yi chanda shin de gami tian hang ye se na yi ani de bi ge chimi de yo ayi na ani sanje ge so ne ge da wa de de bi chimi no na sha ma ja la tian san ge ya ma ro de jing ma be ja de so ya.
So here, one thing that is very important is a cultivation of appropriate or the genuine faith is also important part of one's practice, particularly when it comes to the cultivating appropriate motivations. Just as the verse that we find in the invocation of the wisdom beings in the 13th deity Yamantaka, where it stated that as by the power of one's faith, the reflection of the sublime beings can be vividly appear. So it is therefore, if one is able to, cultivate a genuine faith, then it also facilitates for one to actually cultivate appropriate motivations and visualizations of the refuge fields and so forth.
다 때문에 두명 뭐 저와 집에네 맞죠 자신 쉬지도 소모다지 년에 신라지 남아서다 맞지 초지 신세들만도 추송당 있잖아요 남아다게 센터는 남아로 대나 얘기 소소기 강 되는 초지 신세나래 들기 저유지 강 네가 제시시지 근데 랑게 네 타고들라요 랑게 저지 파마집에 가서 미지 제나 아니 양들라 아니 되는 되라 아니 저와 저시마 민치 동시 잡혀 소원 대신 말로지 네 미바 다 제비도는 센지 용도에 저와잖아 가만히 있으면 되지.
So here now, as usual, let's visualize Buddha Shakyamuni in the space before oneself, surrounded by all those lineage gurus of profound views, extensive deeds, lineage gurus of profound views, lineage gurus of extensive deeds and blessed practices. All of this, having visualized all those lineage gurus, one then visualizes being oneself in their presence, surrounded by all sentient beings without exceptions. Just as we have a desire to achieve happiness and overcome sufferings, so too all those beings have a similar wish. So it is therefore, let's have a cultivated faith towards object of refuge that you have visualized, and also extending your compassion towards all other sentient beings. With this, let's take a couple of minutes to meditate.
네 되게 안 되는 쇼비게 네 저희 더 자치 모임 비치 생각을 했어요. 좋아지 되고라. 지 와서 선제열의 신로 치료를 살아야를 넣어야서 거기에 대해 이제 열에 말했어야 돼. 제선 나오고라. 이제 열에 가려요리 셀라서는 네 다당가서 담바 상제 편도 로 뒤서들 진로차리나 담바 이게 송 다다란 지에요. 이제로 반타르지.
So now we revere, we have reverence and reverence towards this object of refuge that we have visualized earlier, and we also consider this object of refuge as a very, very precious. So then here now question is, what is the reason for considering all those objects of refuge are so precious? It's because now, let's begin from that. Think about the Buddha who came to this planet Earth more than 2,500 years ago, but we still can listen to his teachings and receive his teachings as if he is still alive.
가제 드르게 상제선은 가지 탐에버 선체게 제무도게 상제선에 시제랑당을 주버지 세그래다. 당가 쪽에 때문에 로니도 다 페이지 주자선에는 드르지라 네 메이샤zo 것에 되는 편에 아니 덴바지 총고로서 총고를 바지고 아니 총고를 바지에 되고네 아니 대단해서 렘베게 자바기 벤루 벽이 벤루 당가서 다도나 소소게네 제자이나 바지 아니 손 대단하네 전에 또
So here now, when speaking about enlightened beings in general, suddenly we're speaking about the beings who actually arises out of a primordial wisdom. Those kind of enlightened beings, the enlightened body, cannot be viewed by us. We're not. It is something that is obscure for us. However, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni who came to this planet Earth more than 2,500 years ago, or 2,600 years, you could say, who came to this planet Earth in a human form, just like ourselves, and turned the wheel of Dharma. And that's whatever that Dharma that he taught his followers is then be followed by the practiced by his followers, such as great Indian masters and then great Tibetan masters as well, all the way to one's own root guru.
다데 라미나 타세네 드르리치 총한지려와이나 아니 나 제법이 쳐와서 드르지 안지로시 아니 송게 쳐와송이나 다 쳐사는 시나다 간주도 된주세네 베드포트에 지셔야 되더라 다 델레 마로 쳐서 한게 타 녀선의 시에서나 아니 다 정원은 지기 지난 속에 상주세는 동반이지 된 녀선 내쇼다 제도 내질 총송송돼야 돼 아니 송디게 니버선에 아니 송게 쳐와더라.
So with this, we have covered the first outlines of the Lam Rim Chenmo, the greatness of the authors given in order to show the teachings as noble source. The next is showing the greatness of the teachings in order to engender respect for the teachings. Let's just think about the teachings given by the Buddha. The canonical teachings, we have Gangyur, which is the direct translation of the Buddha's teachings himself, and the Shastras, all the translations of the Tengyur, which are the deities or the commentaries commented by the Indian masters. All those the volumes of the teachings are actually encapsulated within this particular teachings, which is the great deities on the stages of the path to enlightenment. With this, we cover the second outlines of the Lam Rim Chenmo.
다 된저지게 줄을 총하게 아니 총식 간에서는 다 된저게 소수기 줄을 제와라 아니 공도는 어디 가르쳐 버렸잖아 최제도 이제서 또 경로기 지선한 거이잖아 다 경로선에 가서 내가 가르치는 차이만 되마다 내가 제예요 말아 된저지게 나요 이잖아 나랑 가서 지미 미바데스 제셔야 돼요 사지 소바데게 천대체 안다 사지 제반원제서 가서 남방은 절로만 제대로 이런 발라니 아니 그런 짓자와 신이 된 비치도 아니 되는 거 제다 니스 네 로마 방지 지상의创상지 레벨로
So here now, it is not only that we are considering those teachings are very precious, but also we try our best to practice, to have a realization of all the teachings that are given. And for that, in order to gain realizations, one should have appropriate motivations that we talked about earlier. The motivation actually plays a very strong role, critical role in one's own spiritual realizations. With this, cultivation motivations covers the third outlines of the Lam Rim Chenmo, and then will be followed by the sequence in which the disciples are to be taught the actual instructions, and relying on the teachings at the root of path, and how to listen to how the students train their minds after having relied on the spiritual teacher.
네. 따따야 땅가 좀 전화도는 전화는 내가 강가라 선바데 출연은 자체 잘해 그래. 가서 제 뭐지 배반이 뭐지나 대바에 배가라 아니 대바에 대해봐도 선바 출연으로랑 선바에 배가고 치그래. 이제 콜 인데 주면 그 문에 안 돼요. 그 가보야 돼. 배바드니나. 단 추선의 디지 공시도 빼면서 해야 돼. 처음에 시비가라 코로나 메티네 선바디 제란 돼요.
So here now, the one thing that I'm pretty sure about all of you who are here to listen to the teachings, you're not only just yourself physically present and listening to the teachings, but you're putting forth your mind mentally. You're listening very carefully and following the teachings and thinking the reasonings and going through analysis by yourself, which is not just only a faith, but you're also applying a reasoning, which I think is a very, very positive sign. But whereas our Tibetan, in our Tibetan communities, which such quality is lacking, they have out of faith, they come to the teachings, but they're not really following the application of reasonings and so forth. Something that the Tibetans should look up to, you guys.
다 이슈다 뭐로 된대지 다 된다 다 런지 자신이 되면 되는 로지다 장이를 많이 지시봐 동본지사 다 되는 로지다 장이를 벌라니 대대는 힘벌린 비시 그거도 힘벌지 달린 비치니 다 동본지사 다 힘벌지 달린 비치들니 런지 나자는 예바지스도 힘벌린 좀 뭐지 다 동본지사 다 힘벌린 증문을 송 주부 증문도 통하는 나지를 만나서는지 주부 전다 통하는 나지를 만 주부 친필 나지를 만나서는 제 렌스유지 다 동본인들사 다 동본라 송 말에 송발라 송 언제 아니 대전은 주고 고 담바 선제 코나된 바 선제 제다 집이 주 선제나 쇼발로 주의지 다 동본인들사 다 선제나 쇼발로 로주들 송 선제는 로발로 로고비 자세 로발에 레발로 로베 선제면 주고 된바 로발로 베리만 예시 바지 다 동본인들사 다 로발로 베리만 예시 바들라니 대바치 뭐절로 저도 치바도 도제 대바로 주의지 다 동보라서 상세적 하발로 나대장 전에 저스지 담바송 손에 제단에 주의제 다 동본인 제사 다 손에 제단에 비치더라니 강라로 비지 델러바는 델러로 비렘바지 Omani Desa. Tatella Robin Balani. Shoba Chilla Lozedan, Chiba the Pasha Tamanilan, Lotsuji. That Dombola Soni, Rangi Sanji Chimibashiva, Paroshima Lozedan, Zinji Chimibashiva, the Yomobajan, Lotsuji. That Dombola to Jimba Lotsu, Children Lotsu, Zoba Lotsu, Zundri Lotsu, Sunday Lotsu, Shara Lotsuji. I didn't know the Shansen, the Dambazan, and just said Shoba Logovi, in the part of the Shimbadan, the Yomobaji, and Paroshima Tuji. Do you know any? Passion Naba.
So we are following under the teachings of how to train in the Bodhisattva state in general, and how to train the Bodhisattva state, how to training in the perfections that matches the qualities you'll have when you become a Buddha, and then training in the 4 ways to gather disciples, gather disciples that help others to mature. So out of this 2, we are on the first outlines, training in the perfections that matches the quality you will have when you come to Buddha. So with this, the practice has the 6 practices, generally known as the practice of 6 perfections: generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance, joyous perseverance. And out of all the 6, so we have covered above 4 perfections. Now we are on the particular chapter of the chapter of meditative stabilization.
The Sunday, because it's only you do teach and Yabuchi Loro Jang, and the Chunju winda. Data was Sheba shed the Chitawa Janyos, Malay Chang, Loti shows Zone, Junibi, Zundri, Zana, Lazanji Shuba, Ne, Sombata, Jawa Jendo, Chunga Dong Him, Nudo, Zundri, part of the Shimba. Sheba Sombi Shoro, part of the Sheba Zoba Sheba Sombi Shoro, Digilorita. See the Tona the Desno.
So let's repeat the last paragraph of the perfection of joyous perseverance. Not entire last paragraph, but the question of the Subhava Sutra says, let's repeat this once again, reading this, once again. It is still on the perfection of joyous perseverance. As the question of the Subhava Sutra says, just by generating the powerful surge of such resolve, you accumulate a great wave of merits. If you do not do this, you fail to secure your Mahayana lineage, and you also continually stained by much wrongdoings. Then in other lives as well, you'll find it difficult to learn the Bodhisattva states. Also, after you have become aware of such things, even if you do not practice perfectly, motivate yourself in the directions. If you then joyously persevere to the extent that you are able, then at the question of the Subhava Sutra says, you will quickly complete the perfection of joyous perseverance in future lives without suffering and with little difficulty.
And the song, Tanda Le Tomboagi, Jetawajin, the Sumba, Nakinos, and Lematuno, Lotte shows a transferina, and the John and Sarah Janda, passing Chungingone, and the General Parashim by your Sondoa.
So here now it says, if you were to, divide those 6 perfections and what Bodhisattva boom is that you will be perfecting, the individual 6 perfections, this particular perfections, and the perfection of joyous perseverance, the perfection of joyous perseverance will be perfected when one reaches the fourth bhumi of the bodhisattvas, which is also known as Sajipa Vaitava. The fourth bhumi is illuminating the bhumi. The fourth bhumi is known as the illuminating bhumi. So when you are at the moment that you reach the fourth bhumi of the bodhisattva, you will be perfected your practice of the joyous perseverance.
당가서 나바 상대 파르 심발라 니 장가와 세그레 장가 장기살로 pom바니 바인스네 아니 사 나바 장가와.
So then the fifth is the perfection of meditative stabilizations, which will be perfected when one reaches the fifth bhumi of the bodhisattva, and which is known as the difficult to learn. The practice is known as difficult to learn.
당가에 치 엄마 이때 치 친구진도다 다니 체데 디노 켄지 좀 대체 배제다도 되게 나면시 네 치 도도 쉬진도 상가버들 치 쇼로까지 맞습니다. 대제 로는데 생이라 다니 체데 디노 켄지 좀 장기살로 펌반님 바니 펌반님 바니 상대하죠 로런 대랑시 아니 그래서 상대하죠 로런 대자에
Shimotolang Shinto Capriccio.
What is Shimotolang Shinto Capatos?
No.
Ten Omanjuva, Titsite, Shoshuchi, Cotton, Rishis and Amachi, Sit Zachima, Lotor, Shuichi.
So this fifth bhumi, as we mentioned earlier, it's difficult to learn or difficult to overcome. It's also known as difficult to overcome. So which begins from the verse 다니 체 de gyunam kun yi kyang jangge sala pempa numa yi samde laji konsa teba de shima tola shin do kebacho. So let's I'll translate this in brief, roughly in English. It's Rinpoche is reciting from the Chandrakritis Madhyamaka Avatara, where it's stated that all the demons of the self-importance cannot defeat on the bhumi difficult to overcome, which is the fifth bhumi, and exceptional in concentrations, noble-minded, and with the subtle understanding of truth, he becomes skillful. That is the verse that Rinpoche recited earlier in Chandrakritis Madhyamaka Avatara.
상대적으로 대감발한 주비 더 상대적으로 예와 대다 주비스 제다샤와 대다게 된데 봐오 한번에 사정한도 지발에 거야죠.
So now let's begin from the perfection of meditative stabilization and how to train in the perfection of meditative stabilizations has five parts. It begins from the 5 parts. 5 parts are at meditative stabilization, what meditative stabilization is, how to begin the cultivation of meditative stabilizations, the divisions of the meditative stabilizations, how to practice, a summary.
다 동부 상대 중앙에서는 간지질은 문제 제거를 살아와이나 동부내에서 미발의 젠도 마이와 미와 네비 센세지바데 상사래 송도아.
So here now, what meditative stabilization is. What meditative stabilization is here? Meditative stabilization is a virtuous, one-pointed state of mind that stays fixed on its object of meditations without distractions to other things. The Bodhisattva's level says.
안되지. 단도 상대적 공식이 상가바와 주지 상대 시작전에 여와 당원의 시행면도 제단에 나촌에 단단한에 두두야지. 세미발의 현대면 제집에 생기라 제단 상대에서는 세그래. 다 땡인지야 세그러.
So here when we are actually talking about the nature of what meditative stabilization is. We're not talking about in the context of the fifth bhumi, the quality of the fifth bhumi's meditative stabilizations. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the general, meditative stabilization.
他想上来要的强壮点的送有的，想上来送的，想去身边短短拖把当上班混沌注意，想去三把当节，节带当节带两的呗，三这几把给我三两把，现在就学上拉动于学上送等这完就比让点你给学感应吧的，但是想去三把当节上点就我你的这把下午写到选就来送的。
So the Bodhisattva's level says, it is the one-pointed state of mind stabilized on virtue and either mundane or super mundane of the Bodhisattvas, who have first studied and reflected on the Bodhisattva's scriptural collections, whether it is oriented towards meditative serenity, towards insight, or towards both, the path that conjoins them. Understand that this one-pointed state of mind is the Bodhisattva's meditative stabilizations, and engaging in the Bodhisattva state also says.
对的，当然这些下就的想去身边解决，你上对下边见到收入的，你想去身边的那拖把的上班我等做你嘛都，你刚就给点子，他刚就刚被点子的，现在的没情况嘛的话，我说拖上你我等做呢，你刚修教育的，你刚就给落实的结果的话，简单讲，或者你们说帮人讲完呢。
So then, however, in this, the Bodhisattva's level says, the explanation of Bodhisattva levels, the concentration is based on the Bodhisattvas who are on the bhumis. We're talking about in the context of the qualities of the Bodhisattvas' meditative concentrations, rather than the general meditative stabilizations. It's talking about the Bodhisattva's meditative stabilizations. In accordance with the Bodhisattva's level. If you look at there, it says first we need to, studied and reflected on the Bodhisattva's scriptural collections. Having corrected, having done that, then whether it is oriented towards meditative serenity, or towards insight, or towards both, the path that conjoins them.
最近呢，也是个呢，就是目前下的送吧，就是目前下去的，这几上的涨了快是这个偏个嘛的，是吧？因真的这几边上的涨就偏个嘛的，你前面就用了，他用给短到了，就他上告诉给你，有了这边拖呢，你刚西边短你了，这几的你那头人就掐说呢，你通家全部等。창조 자료로 마도 생코로 째지고랑 대도이나 그 대녀와 샤와녀와 소리지마도 럽칭 이렇게 제토고 말해.
So here Lama Tsongkhapa often mentions that just mere single-pointedness is not sufficient. It's not adequate. It is not ample Buddhist meditations. So one's single-pointed meditation must be derived from listening to the teachings, contemplations, and meditations. And so without listening to the teachings, contemplations, and meditations, just, single-pointed concentration is not effective enough in combating with our mental reflections.
对，他要多呢有的啊，蛮多的人样多的，专注来讲，得到专注见呢，你一的定义成了那把啥谁的也，我所以呢，用过你去参加了，我知道吧？刚来教呢，要那有我当偏个嘛了，刚来教不等你了，做一级西比头弄了，你。 So
here now, then the engaging in the Bodhisattva, this also says, Having thus generated joyous perseverance, set your mind in meditative concentrations. So, whatever the effort that you may have met, and having met one's efforts, one then try to remain one's mind fixed on the meditative concentrations. So then it says how to begin the cultivation of meditative stabilizations. Think over the benefits of cultivating meditative stabilizations and the faults of not cultivating it. So therefore it says, I will explain this in the meditative serenity section. So here, right from the beginning of the six perfections, when the discussion of six perfection, where it says the explanation of the bodhisattva state in general, the sixth perfection in general, bodhisattva state in general, and then the last two perfections in particular. So therefore, what it says is now the elaboration, the deep explanations will be given by focusing on the last two perfections, the perfection of meditative stabilizations and wisdom. So the division of meditative stabilizations, in line with the above citation from the Bodhisattva's level. If you subdivide meditative stabilization according to nature, there are two kinds, mundane and supermundane. And if you do so according to orientation, there are three kinds: oriented towards serenity, towards insight, or towards both conjoined. If you subdivided it according to its function, there are three types: meditative stabilization that stabilizes body and mind in bliss within the present life, meditative stabilization that achieves good qualities, and meditative stabilization that carries out the welfare of living beings. So then here we discussed earlier under the Bodhisattva's level, where it says it is the one-pointed state of mind stabilized on the virtue and either mundane or supermundane. So what is meant by mundane and supermundanes? The mundanes are the bodhisattvas who are on the path but not yet achieved the superior path, or not yet achieved the Arya path. That is what is meant by mundane. And then supermundane refers to the bodhisattvas who actually entered into the path of seeing and beyond.
아니 신내 라통 실라 손들이 내조 대송이 쇼이 아니 제집이 땡긴 제달라 아니 단다기 가 실내지고 마 쇼지고는 신내스.
So it says if you divide it in accordance with the functions, there are three types: meditative stabilization that stabilize the body and mind in bliss, present life, meditative stabilizations. Oh no, that's if we were to talk about divided stabilization according to the nature, there are two kinds: mundane and supermundane. If you are according to the orientation, there are three kinds: oriented towards serenity, oriented towards insight, or toward both conjoined.
디강이 디 가서 상사이 되는 요 다다 장조도 내신 다 신내기 쇼선은 다 신내 쇼선은 신내도 다그 신내도 손대 집에 땡긴 제레 하도도 손대의 집에 땡긴 제데 라 아니 상대에서 레거리 아니 샬라 손대 집 땡긴 제살로 소나 아마라 살라 소나 아니 랑게 손대 집에 땡긴 제데 신내 이바체 랑게 손대 집에 셔러데 하통이나 아니 내줘들 샬라 손대 집 내줘 살라고 다 신내이나 다 신내 코로 땡긴 진 집에지 하통이나 하통이 땡긴 진 집에지 다 실라 손대지 내줘서 라유디 이시대도 손대의 집에 땡긴 진데 신내지 아니 코도 손대 집에 실어대 하통이나 아니 된적이 내줘들 실라 손대지 내줘서 라그러.
So here now we have to make a distinction between this shine.
조직원의 여와시트세야.
So here, if you look at the three ways, if you look at this here, if you do so according to orientations, right? There are three kinds: oriented towards serenity, that is the shine, or meditative stabilizations, or you could say it is mere, which is also known as shamatha, and towards insight, which is lakdong, and then towards both conjoins. But conjoin you're referring to the insight and the serenity, those two conjoins.
신내세도 조선을 제지대 잡을 땡긴지기 찬데 샤 아니 싫어 하통세도 조 싫어기 차도체 아니 이로 소수집이 찬네 제단 고아서 제는 된도.
So the shini, the serenity, meditative stabilizations, the oriented towards serenity, is mere stabilizing one's mind, one-pointed state of mind. The states fixed on object of meditation. That is what is meant by meditative stabilizations, or the shine. And Phakdong, which is more to do with wisdom. Based on meditative stabilizations, you also gain insight into the nature of reality.
되지. 다 되게 되지. 다 실내지고는 세대 소수시선. 실내지고는 샤나 센델을 리센은 가서 통제되는 때 상대세나리 센델을 상디 간제 실어봐 천천히 열어와. 신내 두네 리신장 당 생신의 제통에 되라. 아니 가르사 실내지고네 아니 될라 가르사를 나서 생신 실내지고네 샤나 아니 통제되는 네비 상대세나리 아니 통제 용지지 되는 상대세나리 텔라 동보텔 메디 동보네 손도 강라 냐바자나 류던 생신의 장와 집이 상대소 손도 어디 단다데.
Then here it says, if you divide it according to functions, there are three types: meditative stabilization that stabilized the body and mind in bliss within the present life. So this practice is not only it is not exclusive practice of the Buddhist practitioners. This practice, the function of the meditative stabilization, is shared with the other non-Buddhist practitioners as well. And then it's a meditative stabilization that achieves Buddhist good qualities, and meditative stabilization that carries out the welfare of living beings.
센델리 센라 dewa neba shibi sangten senge de ani sende la shine do na re kanje tendre chi dewa chi la ni shile ji kon de chi da niba te re yende ngoba dubi sangten senge de niba ne sondo mo she da nang ta sa ba se ba dang shine so ji timo re timo yi timo mo iba de timo se na timo yi yende dubi sangten sondo.
And the first is meditative stabilization that stabilizes the body and mind in bliss within the present life. Is all and then all is all meditative stabilization that generates mental and physical appliances. Pliancy when you enter them with equipoise, right? The second meditative stabilization that achieves good qualities in all meditative stabilizations which accomplish good qualities shared with Sherbakas and the super knowledge, liberations, totalities, masters, etc.
되지. 근데 이게 전에 단단되는 무엇이다 난타다 사바다 신내세도 아니 배는 미게 응도되는 시에도 뭐죠? 뜻이되는 인치미지 랑기 센터 신내라 때네 제고.
So all this quality that we talked about earlier, talked about in this particular chapter, which is this achieve good qualities, is all meditative civilizations which accomplish good qualities shared with Sherbakas, the super knowledge, which is also known as the clairvoyance and liberations, totalities. All these qualities must be accomplished on the basis of cultivating meditative stabilizations.
그래서 뭐더니 또 대통령세대 가서 들어라. 이게 난친이 넘버 카드시에디 티바 오미 지를 여바다 just 팀에 난친이 넘버 세대. 아니 얘대 팀모에 전에 잠깐 먹고 써요라. 디시지 않나네.
That's all. So here now, which when it says shared with Sherbakas, well, we have some qualities of the realizations or the qualities of the Sherbakas shared with the Bodhisattvas as well. So therefore, we find in the Samaya Alamkara, where it talks about the common aspect of the omniscience. When speaking about common aspect of the omniscience, it talks about something that is common to the Shervakas.
대로 거대와시나 배나 년중에 삼바도데 지 태바 오마지로 여바다 투모에 나치 남바라고 지래 진영에 전에 사제 이줄라 요래 아니 니랑 이줄라 요로 배나 년중에 삼바라고 지 배잖아.
So let's take an example of renunciations. Renunciations can be the cause of enlightenment. It can be cause of other arhats such as Shervaka and Pradika Buddhas and so forth. So therefore, this particular path known as renunciation can be the shared path with both Shervaka and the Mahayanans.
되지. 다 뜻은 되지. 손바디 선제 대시비 삼대네 손도 대시와 주지 게 대나 주비 삼대 삼대 노 손도.
So then the third meditative stabilizations that carries out the welfare for living beings is meditative stabilizations that accomplishes the 11 activities for others' welfare.
대시와 주지 등에 카세 대지 시가 선소대 가슴에 어제데 라게는 메시 니노네 처음에 야지로나 더 추상하는 생각 카툴로나 저다도 되게 메시 근데 대시와 주지 때라 먼저 지대 대시와 주지 세대 선진 변다 제거서 지기 주 대시야사 유주진으로 지금 문제 제거도
That's all. So here, what is meant by the 11 activities for 11 activities for others' welfare? There are that what is meant by is to how the bodhisattvas, the way the bodhisattva actually work for the welfare of others. And there are 11 ways of the bodhisattvas working for the welfare of other beings.
먼저들이 지나 지 강나 관대 저 대시세 지는 담보들 네 조샤고 봤을 네 조샤요 봤지라 조 제고도 선지 선생이 대세디 선지다 조고의 리트리나
So helping the sentient beings, that is one thing. It is something that needs a help, something that is worthwhile to be helped. And for that, one need to, assist or to help the sentient beings.
아니 톨로 모바세 소나다 다다와 톨로 모바이나 모바테 세고로 최대네.
So then the second is who are ignorant of means, who are ignorant of means. For them, one should help those beings who are ignorant of means.
숨바텔라 펜도 비신 센도아 펜도 고바.
Then third is to performing the welfare those who are in need of help.
숨바텔라 지비니바 센도아 셴나다 짜나다 들려서다.
So then performing the welfare of those who are overcome by distress.
숨바 지바텔도 나바텔라 냥해지 셈바세 강해지 셈바세 그래요. 차으로.
So then here performing the welfare those overcome by performing the welfare to those who lack material objects.
주바데 요시지 폼바 센도 롱시지 폼바 요시지 폼바 지바레시.
나오름이제.
주바데 요시지 폼바 가서 롱시지 폼바 델랑리제다는 롱시지 폼바스 저샤도 요시지 폼바. 고비 요시지 폼바. 다이나 던르기 된쟁이라 양상주 선발라 이 롱시드는 그것은 다다 되게 말하고. 지당이나 차텐.
So then here is the performing the welfare for those who lack material objects or those who lack the resources, in other words.
덴바텔레 내 찬되어 봐 센도아 나소이나 내 찬되어 봐 세나 지가르사 그래 지 당가지 강되어 봐라 강신 바생이 저러 내 찬되어 봐질 내신 바생이
네 찬되어 봐. 네 찬되어 봐. 찬되어 봐라면 아우차차를 배우고 싶은데.
아차라차를
아차라차를
내 찬되어 봐.
So then the next is performing the welfare of those who are a lack of proper shelter, in other words.
로 팀번되어 봐 손도 나래 참 로 팀번되어 봐. 현다 되는 센터 되어 봐 센라션도. 센터 되어 봐 세선아 봐 비게 될라 여체 선바지만이나야 제 로틴 되어 지라 강고 디비쇼라 로틴 되어 요시그리 가령 요시그라.
So here now next is the performing the welfare to those who seek to live in harmony.
센팅 여봐 세세 비게 로틴 받을라니 소소기 때다 팀바 때문에 여봐. 네 센터 봐요 봐서는 양다바 차바 슈바선도 단다 말이 양다바 슈바선 나리 좀 센지한다는 센터 봐요 봐서도 된저기 세제 카실라 양지 센터 거에 들어요 들어다 거에.
So then the performing the welfare to those who wish to enter the perfect views.
슈바도 로바 슈바세데 사치여 봐서도 양던저기 로바를 슈등에 대해서 yana 탑 되네. 아니데 사치 봐서는 되는데 사고르지도.
The next is then that performing the welfare to those who hold wrong views. One should assess those who hold the wrong views and try to teach the person how to turn themselves towards the right view.
주주바데 준취진 되어 샤워여 봐서 준취 때는 되어 샤워여 봐. 그래서 상주 선발을 준취 되게 쳐봐야 말이야. 이나고 지당 그 미비를 다까지 영수 줘봐 커들래야 니 차전지 장원에서.
And then the last one is performing the welfare through miracle means. So
this one suggest 단지 주지되는 소용이 소속이 누에게 차전들 상주 선발들 그게 봐야 말이야. 샤추 선바디게 그게 내가 용수 줘봐더라니 그때네. 아니 개렌토에 센터도 그거다.
So
말하면 게 제가 메시지 매바지.
this is how the quality that is possessed by the bodhisattvas. With these qualities, they can perform their activities, welfare for the activities of the welfare of other sentient beings, because they are not, the bodhisattvas never lack any means or the skill or the skills for working for the welfare of other sentient beings. Let's take 10 minutes break here. So we'll read through the text, continue to read through the text, and given this, we don't have a session next week, so I will take time to answer the questions if you have questions later. So first, let's read through the text. So now here, one thing that we need to, keep in mind is that, since we are on the chapter of meditative stabilizations, the first question one should ask to oneself is what meditative stabilization is. So this one should have a ready answer, one should have an answer, ready for it, right? That meditative stabilization is a virtuous, one-pointed state of mind that stays fixed on its object of meditation without distraction to other things. So in the context of Buddha Dhamma, when speaking of meditative stabilizations, then it talks about one need to first, having received the teachings and contemplate it. In other words, contemplation, listening to the teachings and contemplations and meditations is needed to cultivate this meditative stabilizations. So then here, Rinpoche dan te kengi song nang ke maybe Dr. So then here, when it comes to the divisions, the meditative stabilization that stabilizes the body and mind in place within the present life, meditative stabilization achieving good qualities, and meditative stabilization that carries out the welfare of living beings.
tingezi gyawa chintawa shi drupa nang tangpa chuden to drupa tang pashin chuden tenjawa te es te chidang pashi tanda nga su pashi tongpo kangala jiben raswa.
So then here, how to practice? Whenever you practice any virtuous meditative stabilization, you do so in association with 6 supremacies and all 6 perfections. So we have gone through this during our last teachings. That's 6 supremacies. Like the bodhicitta is the fundamental basis, and ngobodamba is that's engaging in the 6 perfections in unbiased manner as the fundamental approach, and Chedu Javatamba is the working for the welfare of all sentient beings as the fundamental beneficiary of one's practice.
Sidi Tonyu to be Shara Shanju Senba Kanchela, Tonyu to be Shara Singaba, and then Tamba, Namba Taba Tamba Sidi, Dini Pombiche Yimba.
Conjoining all, then this will then be followed by the 4th supremacies, conjoining all one's practice with the thought of purity of the 3 factors, referring to the wisdom realizing emptiness, and then dedicating all virtues to the attainment of the sublime state of enlightenment as the fundamental dedications. And this will then be followed by applying antidotal force against the 2 types of delusions.
That's just the
fundamental purifications.
That's just the Tenino Tesu Yorojana, the Katu Tela, Tamba to the Cadenium, the Kadu Zena, and the Passion Tombo Katu Jairo.
So we keep seeing this, the 6 supremacies. So therefore, if you are really paying close attention to the text, the 6 explanation of 6 supremacies are already discussed at the first perfections, teachings of the first perfection, which is the perfection of generosity. So if you go back to see, if you go back and see it, then if you go back and look, so you'll be able to find. Then here it says, in the text where it says, the generosity of meditative stabilizations is meaning the maintaining meditative stabilizations yourself, and then establishing others in it, and then understand the other perfections from the earlier explanations. So here we discussed that during our previous sessions, and why we are actually engaging in practice of the perfection of joyous perseverance. The practice of joyous perseverance, not only that perfecting, aspiring to perfect one's own practice of joyous perseverance, but also establishing other sentient beings in the practice of joyous perseverance.
That dimension so something watching it. Passion Jadal Join. Something passion about it. Yes, thank you there.
My identity chair
That was a passion to the Nelson and say that Sunday passion Nelson and the Sunday passion of Kubite and Sunday Jimbari as well. That Sunday passion the Kuna, Chutrinji passion can do. 아니 저비 파시 가는 로고 전주 파시 가는 로고 싫어 파시 가는 로고를 세디 딱 소속이 상태 파시기 고아데 세계이나 네 파시 제다도 고아데나 레레신데 춘주 초초야.
So here now it talks about, how to practice one's practice individual perfections in association with the 6 perfections. That we already talked about earlier, that the generosity of meditative stabilization is maintaining meditative stabilization yourself and establishing others in it. This is the generosity of meditative stabilization, practice of meditative stabilizations. So now, then how do we practice, the morality of meditative stabilizations and patience, joyous perseverance, wisdoms, and so forth? So if one has a proper understanding of what meditative stabilization is, and if one has a proper understanding of what are those 6 perfections, practice of 6 perfections, then one can really be able to associate one's practice of each individual practice of the 6 perfections in association with the 6 perfections itself.
그래서 때 상처 생각이 된들이야 자도 토만이야 차기 때문에 가서 차기 자체 뭐잖아 로용이 지레마도 싫어봐도지 상대 지라요 수준의 제도는 것에 개체다 요마로.
So this is the way of practicing, way of engaging oneself, entering into the practice of the bodhisattva. Because when speaking about entering oneself into the practice of bodhisattvas, it's not only just to perfect one's own practice, but also working for the welfare of other sentient beings. That is the bodhisattva's motivation. Unlike the other practitioners, they would just practice and perfect their own qualities, but they have no, intention of establishing others into this practice.
됐지. 나 가서 상처 생각에서 유익게 말은 가서 이때도 팀비 돈에 근데 년에 때 가서 기타 그 상처 생각 돈이 돌았다 매바 영역이 가서 진짜잖아. 하나 진짜라 냐서는 로고를 손 대연주 손소.
So we as a practitioners who follows the bodhisattva's path must do the same. Not only just to perfect one's own practice, but establishing others to the perfections of this practice as well. Even though one may not be able to perfect one's practice in establishing others to the perfections of practice, but one should have a genuine aspiration to perfect one's practice and also establishing others into the practice of the bodhisattva.
안티치 당에 저시 말은 안 되ます. 상태를 추진 같아서는 상태성에做的 전바로와 추진세의 做 송생들로서 선바제도 메요 송에 되니데 그 약치반의 차거리 송이 선바서로 추진세의 송와서 전배선바로 오치려와.
So here the santen, which means the meditative stabilization, is a single pointed concentrations, right? And so the chutim is the morality, the practice of morality is something that one should refrain from engaging in deeds that are negative. So this two has a closely linked to each other.
다 저바다 저리니 집에 상태를 가서 갈래 저투나 아니 저바간 투고에레 아니 텔라 겨 상태를 가서 가고야나 겨를 또 이또 센터가네 상태도 저바니 다란 상도도.
So this, if one has a genuine motivation to engage in the practice of meditative stabilization, then the practice of patience will generate as byproduct. Similarly, that if you are a good practitioner of meditative stabilizations, then you're joyously persevering on the practice of engaging in the virtuous deed will automatically happen. So therefore, as long as you have this practice of genuine practice of meditative civilizations, the practice of patience and joyous perseverance will be followed as byproduct.
미게 코로 신의 코로 냥설래 코로랑 시리 범비체 되는데 냠바자서 코로랑 뎀바니 뎀베동을 냠바장게래 그러와 실라 손제지 내조인 비처를 다간지 상산이바 맞어 대야 그서 하시고 가려서는 상세 상가바와 되라 실라 손제지 땡에 이제 사드 토비체의 산대 파신 냥설래 말이 산대 실라 손제지 내조 여바 강시지라 상대기 냥내 하바터사기 상상로데 아니 상가발레세는 따토니도 비싼데 파셔랑 차도.
So now how the bodhisattvas actually, by maintaining this meditative concentrations and then applying antidotes towards the afflictions, it is because the bodhisattvas who are on the fifth path, fifth bhumi, has by means of their cultivation of the union of meditative concentrations and insight into the emptiness, will become effective antidotes towards elimination of the afflictions. So therefore, when the bodhisattvas who actually first enter into the first bhumi would not qualify to say that it's not qualified, it's not perfectly qualified, the perfected meditative stabilizations, as they as the time ensued, then by means of their continual meditative practice based on meditative stabilizations and employing the antidotes towards the negativities, antidotes towards the afflictions, they perfect the perfection of meditative stabilizations on the fifth bhumi of the bodhisattvas. So therefore, the fifth bhumi is said to be the perfection of perfected the perfection of meditative stabilizations.
이게 당연히 상상야는 상상내 동보 지인나야 티체리 진진 친지라 아니 신의 냥설래야 코로랑 아니 돈이도 별로랑지래 제비 단달래요디 코 상대 코로랑 싫어 파신 걸로 따라와.
So the bodhisattvas, whoever engages in the practice of meditative stabilizations, their meditative stabilization is just not mere single-pointed concentrations. The bodhisattva's way of meditative single-pointed concentration is in conjunction, in association with the wisdom realizing emptiness. So then, other than that, other practitioners, such as non-Buddhist practitioners or the practitioner like ourselves, when we engage in practice of meditative concentrations, shamatha, in other words, and it is not actually, it is mere single-pointed concentrations. It is not actually associated, and one's single-pointed concentration is not in association with the wisdom realizing emptiness.
주비때 just 전신 공부네 선도 선제 통치 사매제 상대랑 그 비시도 로발라 규제 인베 대 규제 인베서 대 템버 때네 상대 공만노장 비비 유트 시에네 양와다 상대 조바 제 많이 나오 뒤뒤스 센제지비 띵엔젤라 지니스 로비 준비 마동 베고 대선
So then, let's read the text, a summary, which is the recollection and cultivation of the spirit of enlightenment. The basis of the Bodhisattva's deed is what is inspire you to train in order to set all living beings in uncontaminated meditative stabilizations. After you have increased the stability of this spirit, then aspire to the high meditative stabilizations and train in train in this. Even if you are unable to fully develop the meditative stabilization, you must strive to train from time to time in one-to-one concentration towards whatever extent you are able.
모차 되듯이 모차 하자래 제가 제시해서 손나 다 된다 되바 내 가르쳐 그래서는 저학교나 상주기 센테네 아니 선제 단계 상대지가 인자네 사범에 상대는 그 비셔도 내 상대냐서 내가 템포지냐서 내가 계시 저 따와진데 제 마투 나요 미비 유도시네 뒤나요 땅도 맞아잖아 아니 상대냐서 내가 인세네 로장걸 손도
So here now the summary, well, it actually summarizes the discussion that we had earlier on the different on this particular chapter, and it talks about how do we practice meditative concentrations. There was the recollection and cultivation of spirit of enlightenment, the basis of the bodhisattvas. This is what is inspire you to train in order to set all living beings in uncontaminated meditative stabilization. After you have increased the stability of this spirit, inspire the high meditative stabilizations and train in this. Even if you're unable to fully develop the meditative stabilizations, you must strive to train from time to time in one pointed concentration towards whatever extent you are able. The same thing with we had a discussions in the Joyce Perseverance.
Listen dewa tang yi dewa tang denba sande je pashin zoba lai shiro sondo de shin de jeba shene je kosa cheban juye de ma zhe so sondo.
Then here it says, for if you do not do so, you will be continually stained with the faults of breaking the precepts. In other lives as well, you will find it most difficult to learn the training for entering the many doors of the bodhisattvas, bodhisattvas meditative stabilizations. Whereas if you never give up your effort, even in this life, you will your mind will become steadily less distracted, making your accumulation of virtues very powerful. In future lives, as the question of Sabhava Sutra says, you will have physical and mental bliss and joyful mind, thereby easily completing the perfection of meditative stabilizations. I will not elaborate further here, as I will be explaining this at length in meditative serenity section.
Tate ngasu takarangre dipena ngasu ma chunyale machana duris kendo mena da jashana tenre jiro. Ngasu dur chunyas mane na nyumo toso senare desha shata timu sogi balo china ngasu dede pa yensade nyepe ni junde nyepe kondogore. Nyepe kondogo yadana jiwane chera tachi de dur mate yarndo yomarwa. Ngasu ngoye ne chirare.
So it's really true. If you look at this, the chapter and summary, it says, "For if you do not do so, you will be continually stained with the faults of breaking the precepts, and other lives as well. You will find the most difficult to learn training for the entering the Mayana doors of the Bodhisattva's meditative stabilization." This is really true, because if you do not practice, if you do not worsen ourselves, our mind and so forth, then this is fine. But however, it's not so. If we do not practice, then our negative thoughts and emotions, such as attachment and aversion and so on, will intensify. It just develops, very steadily right from the beginningless time up until now. So if we do not practice, then what's going to happen to us. This is what it talks about.
원래 되게 냥내지 시나 오늘 지금에 내시게 때제다 단다 소바나 이게 제비제도 단도야 가버려나 근데 나의 제초도 땅토로 저와이나 아니 리더 센데 데이쇼라 아니 제네제네 아니 리모모도 봐야야 왜지 다 고도쇼나 산도는 여러
So here now, he again, if we engage in such practice, then will we be able to accomplish all these qualities as it's mentioned in the text, in no time? And with this, however, it's not so. It takes time. This accomplishment will not happen overnight. It requires lengthy time. One need to continue to practice, and by means of one's practice, then one's mind will become steadily less distracted. This is how we develop, step by step, and eventually one will be able to overcome all those distractions and accomplish the sublime mind.
anga sogi 되게 있을 때잖아요. 대다 맞아놨어야 되다. 매시바도 연조 갈래진 지로로지다. anga 소라게 때 최시비 걸어요. 남한테 털켜봐야나 최시비 걸어. 남한 코로나게 아니 다시들 되게 동지적으로 해서 그래.
So this is again in order to remind ourselves. Let's read once again the summary part beginning from the 4 if you do not do so, because this is how the skilled teachers would always ask us to read several times the summary part of the explanations. So let's do it for here. Let's read once again. For if you do not do so, you will be continually stained with the faults of breaking the precepts, and in others' lives as well, you will find it most difficult to learn it, the trainings for entering the minor doors of the Bodhisattva's meditative stabilizations. Whereas if you never give up your effort, even in this life, your mind will become steadily less distracted, making your accumulation of virtue very powerful. In future lives, the question of Subhava Sutra says, you will have physical and mental bliss and joyful mind, thereby easily accomplishing the perfection of meditative stabilizations.
되게 가랑라로네. 근데 마셔나 되지 사례베. 네 시에나 되지 레완 두베세데. 다 최제세데 가랑라로네. 네 고송의 신주제네. 최제데 다 계속 저에게다 내가 치셔대로 랑기 세네. 되는 산제 템바인 세네리 랑기 세네 요소데 되는 랑기 되지 있어. 집에 제자로.
So now try to turn yourself, focusing, turning yourself inward, and just to ask a question: if I do not practice, what will happen? If I practice, what advantages are there? If I do not practice, what the disadvantages are there? So this is how the practitioner must always ask these questions, asking the question to oneself, and focusing inward.
안되지. 대단 다서 뭐 추쇼는 세 통보치 송상도 지레만도 대단하게 유행만도 쓰라. 옛날에 데네존데 다 지원에 체라탄지 유행에 바랑라로 돼도.
So then if we give up by saying that, oh, this is for the very advanced practitioners, not for me, then it will always remain like this. You will always remain from life after life by saying that this is for the advanced practitioners, not for me. It is not suitable for me. So it will always remain like this for forever in our future lives. So we have 15 more minutes. No, since we have no sessions in our next week, so we'll take some questions. We have 15 minutes, and if you have questions, I'll take some questions.
Rinpoche, Kelly has a question that she sent me in the chat that I could ask for her, and then if there's time, I would have a question as well. So the question from Kelly is,
Also have a question.
what was it?
Whoever is.
I also have a question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn. Yeah.
So Kelly was wanting to know if joyous perseverance is defined by being the cause of emotional, physical suppleness.
Physical suppleness. What was that? Can you repeat once again?
I can. So is joyous perseverance, wait, I'm sorry, I might be reading. If joyous perseverance is defined by being the cause of emotional, physical suppleness.
If is a question or
You want to, yep. Kelly wanted to ask if joyous perseverance
okay.
is defined by being the cause of emotional, physical suppleness.
Okay. 전주대 르슴 신장기 규르베스 어디시오.
전주의 레슨 신장이 줄였을라다.
Yes, it
레슨
is.
신장도 서울에 가슴에 전주 진짜 지었을라 유디콜라 대바 dim비 dim바 전주 저조 전주 레리니빙을 아니 신장 전주 지졌어도 전주 진짜 지었어도 아니 신장도 전주기 접을래 자그래라다.
So we talked about this during our discussions, during our previous teaching session, by talking about the faith is the cause of aspiration, and then also the perseverance, joyous perseverance, is a cause of suppleness, physical and mental suppleness.
전주지 파신에 대해 야와셔거다. 전주지 파신사는 전주선비 질마다 매와. 전주 때 가서 질라 단다 여러와.
So here now, one thing that is very important to make a distinction between the joyous perseverance and perfection of joyous perseverance. We have to make a distinction between these two. So joyous perseverance, the quality of joyous perseverance is, is possessed by individual, like ordinary beings as well. But the joyous, when it comes to the perfection of joyous perseverance, it's only possessed, such qualities, possessed only by the bodhisattvas. So joyous perseverance is also cultivated by the non-Buddhist practitioners, and also the shamatha is also cultivated by the non-Buddhist practitioners as well. Okay, next question.
Yep. And so then kind of a series of questions that I think that, I'll just ask. So I'm just wondering if mental and sensory consciousness are two different aspects or isolates of a mind in general. And then if so, I would assume then that means that, do we have the same, like, does the sensory consciousness go dormant after we die? And then the final question would be, if the sensory consciousness does go dormant, does it carry
To the next slide.
karmic imprints, I guess?
To the next slide.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
So, more than that, Joanne, but the then the Yixie and the Wangxi, you number two what it is. Yixie and Wangxi, you number two what it is. Number Charlie cover your
이시다 원신이 된 넘버 집어 말이.
then that the dinner not the mutin question kasur de dewa direction che tak nganzo kanda shive kablia da so de don't stove kablia ane kanda wonshi dige de baling yegrebe wonshi de machidane ko mewe chegrebe baling ye to gorebe wonshi gi gunchima se so so ya sechimalia to gorebe wonshi gi gunchura ba wonshi gi gunde sechima to gorebe
원식이 제시만 로그래라다. 배는 것을 원실로 때 되지요. 배는 리진의 제진생이들 뭐 진생이들 뭐 쉬어져요. 리진의 제진. 원식이 이말은 로그래 18진 체절은 일행하면 것도 마송하는 18것도 제요 말에 18것도 로그래서라다.
So yes, this then the teaching would and the Yanzong Shibe Kalia, the sorry, Maranja, the one shit sure about one shit the balling you or this. Balling you or this.
onshi bala nyedaran segrewe bala nyedaran segmari onshi de pene onshi de bala nyesena segmari onshi gere
never did quite give
onshi ge nibade shingo kundo ite kechate shigaye shigmari kachi shigmari kanji onshi tanga so yena shibatela jindele zejin de region singi zejin de region zejin de sona dogo
taken to what is less. So here the mental consciousness and sensory consciousness, that's a different aspect. Those are not the same aspect. Okay. And then we do not say that when someone is dying, their sensory consciousness in a dormant manner. It is not what we say. But however, your sensory consciousness continues its substantial continuity. Substantial continuity. It works into substantial continuity or the continual substantial continuity will will go to the next life.
this is just trouble to Benanga so tanda shendo pumbochi de ben de po shendo we no so mene chego ye so na ne ashe ye tanya ko yamare ishi chikoro ko yunjo ba zo kan me ti chewa somba de zo kan che so na ya ko da ran le ko ma man de ba ti ji mi she ba la ne de chile yo se de ke che yamare ishi de control do ro.
So here now it is not necessarily be said that individual who's actually deceased and when someone is already passed away, and it is not necessary to say that their continual of their sensory consciousness, that's the substantial continuity of the sensory consciousness to go to the next life, because for instance, if someone who passed away and take a rebirth in formless realms, they do not have a sensory consciousness. They have no sense consciousness up there. So therefore, it is not necessary to be said. It is Lam Rim Chenmo.
Onshi gi resa tabada bedanga benanga so gi tanda gi ji ne lo lo shi benga so da wo ji onshi de sa da bedanga chu go sa ro yin chi mi ji ko jiwa shima de la onshi de ni chang jang ge de yin chi mi ji jiang ha ma de onshi de gi jin yin go ye na me na de da ji re je jin do re jin do ji se ne je jin se ne ji ji de che ro ma do de da ran go ga ye so da
So
bet phong bo mo bo le onshi de ga ne ni chang jang me de la go ro ko ba le ni tra se ga ye so.
So it is not definitely, that's also we should also analyze. It requires an analysis. We cannot really say there's no, such substantial continuity will go to the next life, or it may go, it may not. So it is also open to debate. We need to discuss more on that.
Oh yeah, that's just
Okay, the next question.
Yes, I have a question. It's a quick question. I'd like to know more about the Bodhisattva's bhumis. And I understand that he mentioned Chandra Kirti, but this is a pretty, it's pretty dense. Does he have an English author who has a text in English that's a commentary on the 10 bhumis that he could recommend? Would like to kind of see ahead, it's like I'm just curious. I'd like to know more about those bhumis.
So Moran Chinanda de Mandat Chanju Sempe Sa Migan the Sadang Win such a way about the Shende Shida Yesudo. The test Kalka wins at a Sinele the Inji Nalia Chik Sadang Win such a way about the Kandichik 장주 센터서 되게 레레레지 독세 거수로지 대시 여교롭던데 지금 하게나스 인데 송도
아니 제단도 여러 애도 메시 제단 막 가서 이게 사치 맞지 셔발라 오만주가 차서 로고 오만주가 되게 막 가서 되게 취미나를 just 취미나 근데 이 지마치 현 로알로 오만주가 지마치 현 로고 오만주가 이 선제 동번에 선제 집이 봐도 아니 사대에는 연대의 치체의 예치다 산도 더 강가로.
So in order to know precisely about all those 10 bhumis, then one really need to study the Madhyamaka Avatara, beginning from the first chapter all the way to the 10th. So then if the precise explanation, is found in the commentary of the Madhyamaka Avatara.
오만주가 인치고 제시하면다.
오만주가 여기를 여대 뭐지 여래. 오만주부터 여래. 여다지.
오만주가는 집에 차분히 지래마도 오만주 코너에 제시라는데 아니 사이 여대로.
So if you have the Madhyamaka Avatara's translation in English, so then it talks about the qualities of the each bhumis and qualities of the each bhumis and the each bodhisattvas who are on the particular bhumis.
All right. I was just, I heard many times that the text, I have the text, I've gotten it, it's on my shelf. I haven't, touched it yet because I hear that it requires a guide, it requires the teachers to go through it. So I haven't looked at it, but I will take a look. I appreciate it.
Tomorrow, yes, I did. Umajube, Injinama, Guru, more than that, lawyer Jumason, Mikashe said they are Sosoya, Gigin, cutting them into Kuwa, to Sonda, Moloyak, and the desert in the Jumason, Loyak, the Chemesa, the login Sondomara.
다다래 델로레고 인지미정가 소 있지 용코르게 고안에는 소소를 제발한다 뭐네 이제 트그에서 되게 말에 단도 코 도라라 도기리스 다고 단도 그에서 기어 말에 소소 고아 강연도 전에는 빼야고라다.
This is all belongs to the sutra text, and it is always good to read and try to, get the meaning of the text. It is always good to read. It doesn't really require someone to guide you.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying. I appreciate it.
아니 다시 하려.
Any questions?
I'll ask a question if I can articulate it. So Rinpoche, I understand that each of the perfections, the 6 perfections, is practiced along with the others. And my understanding is that in the end, until you've achieved the perfection of wisdom, and which of course requires the other 5, until you've achieved all of them, you can't really perfect any of them. So what does it mean to say that a bodhisattva is on the first bhumi and has accomplished the perfection of generosity, for example? Since the other perfections are not yet accomplished and they're required as well.
그런 저어디 등체 등주stan데 언제 파신도 냠렌 제벌이야 파신도 레렐이야 파신도자 창고제제 즉 반에 진배 파신 냠렌 제벌 갈이야다 제다 냠도 진배 소팀다 진배 서버 진배 손도 진배 삼대 진배 셔럽시 최산 삼지 냠렌 제고도 봤어 냠렌 되면은 그 반에 진배 파신 냠렌 양다버 처음에부터도 봤어 뒤인배는 아니 진배 파신 냠렌 nange and the sadangul neve penatonlam neve changsem tonlam betul chejabra chimbena koron chimbe phajin chelaba tober de ne ko phajin shamba zoldan de chelaba toy maros ko chimbe phajin nyamne de chimbe phajin nyamne yanda chagme berbes kanres diresh
ale jimbe phajin ge nyamne sapa yana satombo de la phajin jode de nyamne re de phajin ju ma sang ge shangchi se be peje jimbe chi yo ma 미네가 코로나 해임에가나 토만을 끊어 코로나게 생유 샤 코로나 샤 진비 파신 코로 토만 매 년에 제유되네 아니 파신 조den기 차진 차도 상용으로 장주서 봐이나 선에 년에 야요 바로 전에 어디 아니 파시 때다 때 년에 하바 터버리마도 지 치바당 마총아 기게요.
So here, so long as the practitioner is bodhisattvas, their practice of the perfection, such as generosity, will always practice in association with 5 other practice. There's no such bodhisattvas who practice generosity devoid of 5 other perfections. Not at all. Right from the beginning of their practice, they have a motivation not only to practice of generosity, engage in the practice of generosity by themselves, perfecting their own practice, but they have a genuine motivation to establishing other sentient beings in the practice. So therefore, if you really carefully think about how the bodhisattvas actually practice, the practice of engage in practice of generosity, there's no such that we can really say that this bodhisattva was lacking, practice of morality, practice of this and that. However, having said that, we have practice when each Burmese, when you reach onto each Burmese, they said they have perfected in that and that. So it is what is Nyamlin Chelhak Ratova, which means they have actually gained the super knowledge, what do we call super knowledge of practice of patience, super knowledge of practice of joyous perseverance when they reach the 4th Bhumi and the 5th Bhumi, when they reach the supremacy practice of meditative stabilizations when they reach the 5th Bhumi and so forth.
파시 집도 지기 마성을 깨서 말했으라 이봐.
So
집도 지기 마성보다 치바 깨서 게 말해.
It is not there's the bodhisattva's practice will never lack any of the 6 perfections. So long as they engage in one perfections, their perfections, practice of the their particular perfection will be practice in association with the other perfections. Always. For instance, the bodhisattvas who are on the path of seeing, the first Bhumi, and their wisdom realizing emptiness is intuitive. It's a direct realization of emptiness. So what is meant by they have gained this supremacy of sudden perfection, which means to abandoning the particular obscurations, a particular affections that is to be abandoned in the particular Bhumi. But each and every Bhumi has a different obscuration to be eliminated. Let's do our dedications by means of our merits, including the merits that we have accumulated today and the merits that we have accumulated in the three times, present, future, and past. And by gathering all those merits together, and by means of this gathering, accumulation of those merits, may I gain the state of enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And may all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to do this.
日照理解年的结果的上界深度面对别我多个能行了学吧手叫我更多养到那么人民确决别了弄是撒当弄是有的绕走罗着将给国邦牛多手也当不着面对那个那样大呀面天天人都别的所念可多样不可惜所不的老面马里给动着我弄那真叫也红不到就急天马随便才了更多江边杨家在原街上天边人把跟苍狼接球年年周边见那年些手让给接近多边狼接酋长在原长月到给接若月月节明白谁先呢家业担保有人在着急担保人情交给马家乔江娘把举杯说的你这前辈一路就不一遍地对的是我写不出最近教育民众真的列住上主浪就准备他的浪就一了别的家园在把人都讲究起拉上周边天前主席节夜间世界门当面面才让更多家园好不易拿到劳动者我们就急刚才贴吧出了去学节期间住了怎么地边菜土地能就大多出些节这些将是说有就些觉得拉面过在老店节能够真的说真节不能罗上天边正面撒松节若月面三道念就节看着让人过于心安死天当的我们的教育的现在在我的人叫作业小别心天不练就钱叫别八月知道钱不懂更多什么这样的钱的得到跟着接受道路是给我的道当街劳动我就说西边叫我当街我刚了就多我把的那些给人找我的给讲从不谢谢劳动我哎呀对不起Thank you